Well, I mean, it was obviously a great experience. I mean, it was, which was the main part of my childhood. Um, and yeah, I mean, I loved it. Just to answer the first part of the city being different. So, like, you know, when I started writing, it was like 91, I'd say, 92, definitely, every day. Early in, 92, that would probably be like when I started. The city was fucked up. David Dinkins was the mayor. Like, the crack epidemic was still kind of bubbling, so it was dangerous. This neighborhood here has always been pretty nice. 24th Street area. It's one of the last neighborhoods that held out that people could actually live here affordably, as everything else got more expensive. But yeah, I mean, once Giuliani became mayor and did the broken windows theory and started arresting everybody and putting the fear of God in people for like long prison sentences, the city got safer, but not cleaner. So the bombing continued, even though the consequences were the worst they've ever been. I mean, they're nothing like they are now. Now there's no consequences. So I think of that as, you know, really writing. You know what I mean? Like, because you're like, damn, fuck it all to hell. I mean, I'm gonna get up, and I don't care if I end up, you know, going to jail or whatever. There was the cops were locking you up. There was no like beep beep, like get out of here. Like it was you were getting put in jail. And then Bloomberg came, and made the city like ridiculously expensive. Crime was still low, but then graffiti started to disappear because he started actually erasing it. And I think it was probably the lowest point that I've ever seen to where graffiti was pretty much ending. You go from an era that I started where it was like the streets were virgin, and then guys like, Chino and Astro and Sign and all these like Bester and all these amazing like gate killers, like because that was really the only thing you painted was gates. It was like it never existed. After Bloomberg, and then fast forward to De Blasio and this guy Adams in the pandemic. It's like kind of like how it was. The city is still dangerous, more dangerous than it ever was. You hear all this crazy shit happening. But the graffiti's fucked up because sure I don't follow it, so maybe there's people bombing that. If you're really following it, you're like, oh shit. But it's just like ugly. I mean, not to say mine was particularly pretty, but if I look at pictures on some of these feeds, and just the graph looked better back then. Like, I don't know, like, not to say everyone's, but just some of it is just fucking chicken scratch. Like, I can't understand anything about it. And it's no good. Like, if I see you up and then I see you up again, but I don't know that's the same person, that's not good, A guy like Map, does the M's. You don't have to like his shit, but when you see one of those M's, even in your peripheral, he hit it. That's how you're supposed to do it. But yeah, I mean, so the city's the graffiti. It's crazy. I mean, but I loved it. Growing up at that time, it was just more simple. Everything was kind of new. So yeah, but then going back to like getting started with basically, you want me to talk about getting started with
Yeah, I mean,
RFC and like how that.
yeah, we can go from we well actually something I want to touch on with what you said was you were saying that like during a time period they made it super illegal. They made it so that graffiti, the consequences were just way
Right.
more than maybe they should be, but to you that was really writing because you got to be willing to go to prison, you got to be willing to deal with all the bullshit that's going to come with writing.
Yeah.
Whereas today, you feel like there's really not that much of a consequence or compared to how it was. And I would agree with you. I would say that the people that I know that who have been bagged, it's like a slap on the wrist and you're chill. And in a weird way, it kind of takes the fun away from graffiti and it kind of takes the purpose away from it because, like, what is graffiti but illegal? And so, if like it's fake illegal and nothing's happening, not that
Right.
people at the same time, you don't want to go to fucking jail, but like there's this weird middle ground. And so, back in those days, what was the consequence? What are some of the shit that you would hear happening when people got bagged? And
Yeah.
how did that change the way you'd go about bombing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, like, you know, I somehow, luckily, never got bagged writing graffiti back in the day. Friends of mine who had, I mean, when we were young, I mean, you gotta remember, I started writing when I was like 13, 14. Nowadays, guys start writing when they're in their 20s. Like, that the days of, I mean, you still see young kids walking around, but very rarely. Whereas in my day, a 17-year-old guy had already retired. When I met Wayne and Reese and those guys, they had pretty much, I mean, they were still painting, but they were train bombers. As far as they were concerned, graffiti was dead. I remember them telling me, me and CA, my buddy, who we started RFC, and well, he made it up, and then we met like a week later. And anyway, but we'd go into the Unique Clothing Warehouse where they worked. It was right on Broadway. Sorry if I'm going off a little bit. This
No,
is a
all
good
good,
one.
all good. This is
So,
awesome.
so Unique Clothing Warehouse was this like big clothing store. They had like, it was like kind of like a nice thrift store, but they also had new shit. It was like an Urban Outfitters, Times, Buffalo. What's the name of that?
Buffalo Exchange.
Buffalo Exchange,
Yeah.
exactly. Times, like, I don't even know, like a fucking weird stationery store, like with weird, post-its and little erasers, like every tchotchke. In the front, though, when you walked in, they had airbrushing, and Reese and Wayne and this guy Wen were in there, and I'm not quite sure how we found out, but long story short, CA and I started hanging out there, and you know that of course bought all our friends, and all of a sudden, like, it became like a writer's bench. Literally. You ask anyone that was down there, like everyone would meet there. There was beefs down there. Vandal Squad would come there sometimes on a Friday and like hang out across the street, and it was pretty crazy. And Reese and them would only let Jason and I in to the store. You know, which was why people started saying Reese's fan club, RFC. Jealousy, of course. Nowadays, hey, I am part of Reese's fan club. I mean, I'm a fan, but you know what I mean. But he's a good friend of mine. Actually, I was just texting with him before he came up here. Um, but yeah, so Unique was amazing, and it was so cool to be part of that because we saw Style Wars and things about the writers bench on 149th, and obviously it didn't exist anymore, so to kind of have one of our own, that was huge. Um, yeah, so that was dope, but sad when it disappeared, of course.